Greetings, fellow humans. Katrina here. Quick disclaimer, I'm a professional, not your professional. Nothing about us should be taken as medical, legal, otherwise advice. This podcast is purely for education and amusement. That is it. Disclaimer over. So today I thought I'd talk about what I don't know about boundaries. And I thought that I would read from a few different texts, and those include Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown, as well as The Ethical Slut by Hardy and Easton, and then another book called Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend, and a little bit about each book. So Atlas of the Heart is basically a description of 82 different emotions, I believe. Oh, is it 82 or 84? Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. And what Brene Brown does is breaks them up into categories of places we go when. And she does have a section on boundaries that I think would be helpful to go over. And then The Ethical Slut, the third edition, updated and expanded, is what I'll be reading from. And that is essentially a book for different types of relationships and navigating various interpersonal relationships. And so it's looking at it from more of a relationship perspective on boundaries. And then finally, the Boundaries book by Cloud and Townsend, it actually has a bit more of a religious perspective, but I include it because I can filter through the scripture. Like, just because it has some scripture doesn't mean that it's a useless book. And there's actually some interesting stuff about guilt. So I'll get into it now with Atlas of the Heart. Here we go. I couldn't tell you what page this is on because I'm reading from an electronic version, but boundaries. So boundaries are a prerequisite for compassion and empathy. We can't connect with someone unless we're clear about where we end and they begin. If there's no autonomy between people, then there's no compassion or empathy, just enmeshment. This has probably been one of the most significant soul-shaking learnings of my career. For a couple of years, it made no sense to me at all. Why did all the common practitioners, therapists, counselors, monks that I interviewed talk about the importance of boundaries? Why did the lack of boundaries in judgment seem to go hand in hand in the data? In The Gifts of Imperfection, I write, the heart of compassion is really acceptance. The better we are at accepting ourselves and others, the more compassionate we become. Well, it's difficult to accept people when they're hurting us or taking advantage of us or walking all over us. This research has taught me that if we really want to practice compassion, we have to start by setting boundaries and holding people accountable for their behavior. I was recently struggling with a boundary issue. Yes, still. And I told my therapist that I refused to go back to the saccharin, that I liked solid better. Before I really understood how impossible it is to be compassionate to myself or others when people are taking advantage of me and when I'm prioritizing being liked over being free, as I was much sweeter but less authentic. Now I'm kinder and less judgmental, but also firmer and more solid, occasionally salty. The best definition of boundaries still comes from my friend Kelly Ray Roberts. Kelly Ray was an oncology social worker who followed her dreams and became a prolific global recognized artist. After experiences with some of her art students copying her work and selling it, she addressed her art community with very straightforward blog posts on what's okay and what's not okay in terms of her using images. For example, it's okay to be inspired by her work, but not okay to copy and sell it. This is a simple but profound way to set boundaries. As we say in our organization, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Too often we forget about the what is okay part, and that leads to unnecessary disconnection. When people set a boundary with us, we can feel that they're denying us our right to our thinking and feeling. When we explain up front what's okay, we move the focus to where it belongs. This expression of your feelings or thinking is the problem. It's okay to be pissed. It's not okay to raise your voice and pound on the table. It's okay to change your mind. It's not okay to assume that I'm okay with the changes without talking to me. It's okay to want to be able to do the things your friends are allowed to do. I totally get that. What's not okay is breaking our rules to do them. And lastly, it's okay to disagree with me, but it's not okay to ridicule my ideas and beliefs. So again, that's from Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. And next up is Boundaries from The Ethical Slut, page 92, chapter 10. What are boundaries? It is basic to any relationship, and particularly important in open relationships, that no one can own another person. Some of us who are kinked in a way that may explore kinds of power changes that we call ownership, but regardless of our relationship style, it's essential and incontrovertible, big word, that we each own ourselves, lock, stock, and barrel. We each have the responsibility of living our own lives, determining our individual needs, and arranging to get those needs met. We cannot live through a partner, nor can we assume that just because we have a lover, all our needs should be automatically satisfied. Many of us has been taught that if our lover does not meet our every need, this must not be true love, and our lover must somehow be inadequate, or he must be at fault, too needy or undeserving, or some other sin. If you were brought up to believe that your relationship would provide your other, or better, half, or that your destiny is to submerge your identity in a relationship, you will probably have some attention into learning about your own boundaries. Boundaries are how we understand where I end and you begin, where we meet, and how we are separate individuals. You need to figure out where your limits are, what constitutes comfortable distance or closeness between yourself and others in various situations, and particularly the ways in which you and your lovers are individual and unique. So that was from The Ethical Slut by Hardy and Easton. And lastly, Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. One of the nice things about this book is that it does go into specific examples of various interpersonal situations in which you might set a boundary and get pushback, or you might set a boundary and feel guilty. So this is what it says about feeling guilty. Rejoicing in the guilty feelings. As strange as it may seem, a sign that you're becoming a boundaried person is often a sense of self-condemnation, a sense that you've transgressed some important rules in your limit setting. So I thought that was an interesting thing to share as well, that it is perfectly normal and acceptable to feel guilty after setting that boundary. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have set that boundary. It just means that we endure a temporary discomfort in order for the greater payoff of maintaining our self-respect and the limits of where we end and others begin. I think we heard that a couple times today. So I hope you found this educational and/or amusing. I do appreciate each and every one of you simply for existing.